Yeah, welcome back to Sports Psych. We're going to do part 2 of chapter 2 on personality. Where I left off last time was talking about Freud. Right now, I'm going to go into the Neo-Freudians. That is the theorists that came after Freud that still espouse psychoanalytic theory in general, but made moderations of their own. So the one that I want to talk about most is Alfred Adler, whose contribution is mostly about the idea of striving to compensate for feelings of inferiority. And this has been cited as a way to explain how some sports stars actually overcame less than ideal upbringings. Think, for example, LeBron James. So why is he trying to get better and better and better? Why is he never satisfied with anything? Okay, because there's always these feelings of inferiority that that person has. Okay, again, you may certainly espouse other theories. There's certainly cultural reasons. There's plenty of other theories that explain this, but this would be one that seems to fit from a psychoanalytic perspective. So the film blanks I do have on the slide on the PowerPoints, the idea of its hero and warrior fantasies. That fits our way that we think about sports stars today as sports heroes. And we think of them as warriors, going to battle, every day, trying to, be the best that they can be. All sorts of sports have, language that derives from war. So think specifically football. There's the blitz. There's the bomb. Okay. There's defending your side of the field. Okay. So there's those, and the other fill in the blank is the idea of courage. That our sports stars are courageous as well. Okay. So that's a wrap on the Neo-Freudians. The next one is the humanists. I think the book covers that well enough, and I think you probably have heard of Maslow's hierarchy needs theory. So I'll leave that up to you guys to look at on your own. All right, and then the next one is the idea of trait theories. Okay, the one that's probably most cited right now is the Big Five trait theories. This was determined through factor analysis, taking a whole bunch of adjectives and basically boiling it down to the 5 different axes that we can describe personality on. So the Big Five are openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And if you're following along with the notes, you take the first letter of all those things, it spells ocean. So the mnemonic for the Big Five is the acronym OCEAN. Openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. I think all of those are pretty self-explanatory. Again, if you want to read a little bit more about it in the book, that's fine. Okay. Also involved in this chapter, the idea of perfectionism as a trait. One thing I want you to glean from the chapter is that there are good aspects to perfectionism and there's bad aspects to perfectionism. Okay, so you can't just think of perfectionism as genius being a good thing. For example, Peyton Manning has been cited as a person who is an elite athlete who was so focused on perfectionism with him and his teammates. Okay, but there are negative aspects to perfectionism. If it makes you too rigid that you can't adapt to different situations, that would be a problem. The other trait mentioned in that particular chapter is that of mental toughness. So again, there's 4 different aspects to mental toughness. So read about those, and I think that's, again, pretty straightforward in the book, and there's research involved that Sanderson cites specifically about mental toughness. You may have an idea, obviously, what mental toughness is, but having it broken down to 4 different components, I think, is really important too. All right. The next part of the chapter deals with personality tests. There are self-report measures, and there's also what's known as projective tests. Self-report measures are things like the MMPI, the Athletic Motivation Inventory, and the Profile of Mood States. Also involved in that is what's known as the Wonderlic test. Now, the Wonderlic test as a personality test is based on the Big Five, but you probably have heard of the Wonderlic test in terms of the football draft. That's been used. The Wonderlic test that's used in that regard is more of an aptitude test or problem-solving type test. Okay, but that's different than the personality test. So I do have my Bills hat on, so you may be aware that one of the highest scoring people on the scholastic or the aptitude part of the Wonderlic is actually Ryan Fitzpatrick, who still has a bit of a cult following in Buffalo. All right. So the profiles of mood states, the other one that I do want to specify. Profile of mood states is there's 7 different dimensions. There's tension, there's depression, there's fatigue, there's anger, there's confusion, and there's tension. Okay, so there's a different measures for each one, subscales for each one of these. Okay, and the interesting thing about that is what results in what's known as the iceberg profile. That is, elite athletes are low on all of those, actually below average on all those dimensions except one, and that's vigor. So again, they spike with vigor, but everything else, the confusion, the tension, depression, all that is actually below the level of just average athletes. So again, that's where you get that iceberg profile. Been studied a lot. If you still are looking for a term paper project, any of these things would be ideal for you to look at. Profile of mood states, this iceberg profile. If there's a difference between different types of athletes that we'll cover in part 3 of this lecture, like is there a difference between football players and bowlers in terms of personality? There's a ton of things that you could research. So again, if that's, you pick a sport that you're interested in and personalities of interest to you, take a gander at that and see what you can come up with. Okay. The other type of tests are the projective tests, based on the Freudian theory of projection. That is, you're projecting your own unconscious feelings and attitudes to other people. In these particular cases, you're projecting them onto ambiguous pictures. So you have things like the Rorschach test, the ink blot test. Basically what's involved with that is that your personality is assessed by what you say about this ink blot. Okay? And there's a number of different interpretations for that. Again, based on Freudian theory, there is debate about the validity of it, but again, it's something that you should be aware of. The other major projective test is the thematic apperception test. In that particular case, you're given a realistic picture, but your personality is assessed by what you project into that picture. That is, what's going on in that scene right now, what happened before that, and what's going to happen next. So again, the themes that are involved in that are going to be interpreted in terms of what your personality is going to be like. Okay, I don't usually like to get political, but there is a hashtag Trump projection right now. If you test that out, you don't have to agree with what they're saying, but it gives you pretty accurate depictions of what projection actually means. Okay, so that's going to wrap up the different tests, and then part 3 of this lecture is the specifics about sport and personality itself. Okay, so I think that should do us next. All right, so we'll get into chapter 3 pretty soon then. Okay, thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.